Welcome everyone to Africam4Good, brought to you by explore.org. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be having a little discussion on black eagles and their conservation here in Africa. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Ernest Porter. Ernest is a staff photographer for the Black Eagle Project at Rudicron'S, based in the Walter Sisulu National Botanical Garden in South Africa, where he frequently leads birding tours and has documented the juvenile development of 4 fledglings at the gardens, from hatching to training to departure. Ernest also offers privately guided photo tours to the gardens and Black Eagle's nest. So it's a great pleasure having him on the show. Hi, Ernest. How are you?
Hi, Russell. I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for that amazing introduction.
You're very welcome. You're a man worth introducing. But I've given you a little intro. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, so I'm obviously part of the Black Eagle Project Rudicron'S. That is a group of volunteers. Basically, we've got 2 main aims in this project, and that is to educate and inform the public about the eagles in general, and also to protect their habitat for future generations to enjoy. Now, we are a fully registered non-profit organization, and we've basically been doing, I think, a pretty good job by keeping these eagles in this urban area safe for future generations to enjoy. So that is basically what the project is about in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, I mean, it sounds really interesting, and obviously certainly one of Africa's most iconic birds, and one of our most beautiful eagles for sure. One that we don't see too often though. How did you get involved with the black eagles at Rudicron'S?
Okay, so basically after high school, I had an idea to buy a camera. It was like a new hobby I wanted to start because I've always loved nature. So I got my camera, and closest to my house was this botanical garden. And luckily for me, this botanical garden had a pair of black eagles. So I basically started spending a lot of time photographing them. And this one morning in December 2012, I managed to get footage, a video footage of a young eagle challenging the parents for the food. And it was amazing how ferocious that little guy was, basically mantling the food, not letting the adults get close, and how aggressive he was. So I got that video, and I knew there was a Black Eagle project that monitored these eagles. So I basically found out a bit more about them, and I asked them if I can join them in one of their next meetings to show them this amazing footage that I got. So that is exactly what I did. And after the footage, they asked me to join the project. So that is basically how I got part of the nonprofit organization, where I basically do technology, and also, as you mentioned, I'm a staff photographer for them.
That's awesome. It's a nice way to get involved and to achieve your goals. Basically, force yourself on them. I like it, Ernest. That's the way to do it, I think. Tell us a little bit about the Black Eagles at Rudicron'S itself. What do we expect to see when we watch them? Okay,
so a bit of an interesting fact is that these guys are an urban pair. So they're in this basically the outskirts of Johannesburg, which is quite unique. If you look at the entire habitat, there's a pristine ridge that is preserved for them, but there's houses all over. So that is already quite magical to have these black eagles in an area filled up with so many people. Now, the eagles, they actually go back quite a while ago, even before I started the project in 2012. So a little bit of a story is that I know about is that we had this iconic female that has been in the botanical garden for more than 35 years. Now, her name was Emoyeni, and she basically had 3 males that we know of. So the first male we unfortunately don't have a lot of information on, because that was way back in the day. And she had a second partner called Kwatele, which basically disappeared in 1998. And he was replaced by Tulani, which is the male's name, which replaced him. And then in 2016, we basically lost that female, and she was replaced by the female that's currently in the garden, which is called Makatsa. And unfortunately, we also lost Tulani in 2019, and he was replaced with a new male that we called Mahlori. So we're currently sitting with 2 young birds actually in the botanical garden, and a bright future looking forward to them. So I really think that we've got quite an interesting history, and it's amazing that these eagles have persevered in this botanical garden for so many generations or decades.
Yeah, that is amazing. As you say, for them to have done so well for such a long time in an urban area like that, it must be pretty difficult for them to survive. What do they eat? I mean, I know, black eagles eat different things in different areas, but let's talk about these Rudicron's ones in particular. What are they going for when they're out there?
Yes. So if you look at black eagles in general, just as a background, they would basically go 90% for klipdassie, meaning the diet would consist 90% of klipdassie. But these eagles have to obviously adapt to the environment. And because they're in an urban area, they do not have access to that big supply of klipdassies.
Mm-hmm.
So back in the day when we had the old webcam on, we actually got some nice, interesting information, and we could see what records was brought into the nest for that breeding cycle. And we basically saw that the main item was guinea fowl at around 57%. And then the second biggest item they brought in was rock hyrax at 25%. And then scrub hare is about 18% of the diet. And then you also see interesting prey like a small tortoise and sometimes speckled pigeon, etc. But those three are definitely the main prey items that feed these eagles in the botanical garden.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Now, my Afrikaans is a little rusty, but I'm ashamed to say, but a klipdassie is indeed a rock hyrax, I believe.
Yes, that is 100% correct.
Okay, so that's pretty much what they're going for. Most areas, they tend to prefer hyrax, as you said. So interesting that there are still some hyrax around that urban area that they can catch.
Yes, even inside the botanical garden, you do still see rock hyrax. But there's another reserve just, let me just think, southeast of Walter Sisulu Botanical Garden. And they kind of hunt a lot of rock hyrax in that little reserve. Okay. But it's interesting that they actually moved to non-mammalian and an avian prey type as their main item, whereas most eagles actually go for klipdassie. So it shows a big adaptation that they had to do to their environment, but obviously working very well as they've been living there for so long and really thriving in the botanical garden.
Yeah, I mean, it is amazing. Why do you think they thrive there? Why do they live in Rudicron's?
So Roodekrans is such a great area for them. You have to obviously look at the habitat first for black eagles. So you need the cliffs, etc., or else they wouldn't even be in the area. And the botanical garden has a beautiful southern-facing cliff face where they basically breed. And this is very important because they breed in winter. So they're breeding in the coldest time in Gauteng, but they have the sun facing, sorry, I meant a north facing, not a south facing, a north facing. So they actually get a lot of sun throughout winter, which is really beneficial for them in the cold. But they definitely prefer to breed in winter because of that, because you can imagine how hot it can get on that northern facing cliff face in summertime. So it's just the perfect habitat for them. And I really think the botanical garden and Black Eagle has been working so well, creating a safe zone for them where we try and keep people out of their side of the mountain and we keep the people on the other mountain. So you can kind of split it where the river goes across. And because of that, they've never really felt threatened by the people element in the garden, and they obviously stayed. So I'm really happy about that because we kind of take them for granted, but I know, it is so special. You just can't.
Yeah, as you say, it is super special. For a lot of birders out there, and a lot of our viewers are very much into their birds. It's very high up on the list for people to spot, and they'll go long distances to spot Varro's or black eagle, when possible. On that note, if besides Rudicron's, where else do you find black eagles? Where else could people go and see them, do you think?
Well, in the whole African continent, they do have quite a large distribution, covering almost most part of Southern Africa, but it's skipping the central section, which is mostly Botswana, interestingly enough. Obviously, it's once again very dependent on their habitat. But in Johannesburg, they're obviously not a very common bird. So there's only a few specific spots where you would find them, Walter Sisulu being probably one of the best areas to go. But we have one record actually of one of the youngsters ending up in the Magaliesburg area. So we kind of assume that a lot of the youngsters disperse into that area, which can host a lot of black eagles because of that beautiful mountain range there.
So it sounds like they're pretty dependent on mountain ranges for nesting, which I guess would suggest why Botswana, being such a flat country, just doesn't really work for them.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly correct.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about them, how they nest, how do they raise their chicks? We are fortunate enough that we'll be having a camera getting in there pretty soon to view the eagles. So, what do you think the viewers can expect to see in terms of their nesting, the chicks, and potentially, next year when we do have, hopefully, new chicks arriving?
Yes, so basically, you are asking me to describe the whole breeding cycle in a year. So it basically starts off in March, the beginning of March, where the eagles would collect sticks and green leaves to build the nest. They will start with the sticks, and then in April-ish, they will start with green leaves to create that soft cup for the eggs. Mm-hmm. Then in this time, you would also get the eagles mating and, obviously getting ready for the breeding cycle. Next up would be the egg laying, where they would lay 2 eggs 4 days apart. And then obviously you will get the hatching, and then you will get there will only be 1 chick raised a year because there's Cainism where the one kills the other. So that is an interesting fact about these eagles, but it is natural and it's been happening for 1,000 of years. So it's obviously part of their whole breeding cycle. Then once the one is survived, now they are going to obviously feed this youngster, but it grows up so quickly from the tiniest little chick to a full-size black eagle in about 3 months. So that is 2 centimeter average growth the year of the wingspan if you calculate it. It's just mind-boggling. Now, once that youngster is at around 90 to 100 days, he will take that leap of faith and leave the nest for the first time. Then after that, you're looking at about 2 to 3 months spending with the adults, and at the end of the 3 months, the adults will basically start getting aggressive towards the youngster. Now, this is not completely just banish and you're out of the area. It's almost a lot training, and it can continue for 3 to 4 weeks. So it's definitely not the real sense of aggression as we humans use it, but it serves a bigger purpose. But after that 3 months, the youngsters will also not be being fed that much, so they'll start getting hungry. And while being hungry, the adults are basically mock attacking them, etc. And then they start figuring out, like, I need to get out there and I need to get food for myself. So that's kind of how they eventually move off and start their own life, try to find a new partner, etc. And then the eagles have basically a few months, 2 months of vacation where they don't have to worry about a youngster in the vicinity. And then it all starts again in March. So that is just as quickly as I could to go through the breeding cycle.
No, that's perfect. I mean, so as you say, you pretty much will, we'll have our viewers being able to see this entire cycle, because a lot of this takes place around the nest, as you say. So quite exciting for people to watch if they're interested in this entire, breeding cycle in 1 year, I would think.
Yes, and so what the viewers can expect through the camera is more than just what's going on in the nest, because we are still in the early stages of the camera, but I think the final position of the camera is going to allow a lot of places to be included on the live feed. So we might be able to perhaps see some mating in a tree, etc., depending where it happens. So there's quite a lot to expect from this web camera. I'm really excited.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we can't wait either. It should be in around about December, if I'm not mistaken. So keep an eye out there, folks. We'll let you know as soon as it's up and running. But exciting to have the Black Eagles live on camera pretty soon. Now, the Eagles have names. You spoke about that a little earlier in the show. How easy are they to identify once we get the cameras in and to figure out who we're watching?
Yes. So if we are talking about the adults, let's start with the adults. So we've got 2 adults that are pitch black. Now, unfortunately, in appearance, they are almost identical. With the exception that the female is slightly bigger than the male, about 30% bigger, especially with weight. So if the camera were to photograph them sitting next to each other, you would just see the one towering over the other one, being a bit bigger. Then it would be quite easy to differentiate between male and female. But if you're looking at one bird at a time, it can be very challenging. Even for me, that I've been following them for years, I really use high quality photos, looking at fine features on the face and temporary feather conditions, temporary markings on them to just differentiate. So it will always be a challenge for anyone to identify male versus female, but I guess it's part of the fun and part of the challenge.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
obviously all the juveniles are light brown mottled, so they just would stick out. So you would easily see the juvenile. That would not be any problem for anyone to identify.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll get into that next year, on the shows when we're watching them, and try to help everyone out there to learn who's who with your help as well, of course. Who's your favorite eagle? Do you have one? Are you allowed to have a favorite?
This is always difficult for me, but I do have a favorite, and it is just based on first experience, that first time you were wowed by an eagle. So it was obviously the first female I followed, which was Emoyeni, that iconic female that has been in the garden for more than 35 years. It's when I started with photography, everything was just lining up perfect, and she just made my years of studying at university so pleasant. Taking every day I've got off going to see her and photograph her. And then my favorite juvenile was actually not the first one I saw, because I only had a very short time with the first one, which was that video that I took getting in part of Black Eagle project. But the one just after that, the first one I could follow for an entire year, was my favorite juvie. And it's pretty much the same factor. Just that first time you really get to spend some real time with a bird, get to know the personality, etc. And I guess, your first will always be special. Not that I don't react like a child for every one of them. It feels like a child before Christmas with every juvenile, but that's just in my heart, I guess. That is just the first time, and it was very special.
No, I think you're right. If we, as you say, lucky enough to have a check next year on the cameras, I have no doubt the viewers will have a new favorite as soon as it arrives. So we'll see how it all goes. With your work with the juvenile, and when you first started, I'm sure that was probably the most influential time for you. But what was your favorite, or one of your most memorable sightings with the eagles?
So there's basically three things that come to mind. Now, the first time I saw aggression was really exciting, because I've only really read about it in literature, etc., but you haven't seen it for yourself. So just to see how the adults would attack the young one, once again, attack not being a real attack in the human regard, but basically train this young one and getting it, everything about their life is ferocious. So from being hatched to leaving the area, everything is just, to be an eagle, you need to be tough. But just to witness that and see it for yourself was so amazing. And to see the emotions of the young one, because they would, for example, be aggressive towards that young one in the morning, and then they disappear for an hour, then they come back with prey and they deposit for the young one. So it's been like so aggressive, and then here you go, here's food. So it's just really magical to see how they handle those young ones. So that is the first time I saw that. It was really magical and was really excited. Now, the next thing was in 2015, when we had the juvenile called Kendi. There was a situation where I was out there and I got the adults returning back to the nesting area with a guinea fowl in the talons, but the guinea fowl was not dead. He was clearly alive, so he was still looking around. Now, this is just a theory, but I'm pretty sure that the eagles brought that guinea fowl back kind of as training for the young one to kill it, which shows just amazing intelligence, etc., because they usually can kill a guinea fowl, especially right with contact. And that guinea fowl was clearly alive, and that juvenile really just ripped that guinea fowl out of the air, and it was just one massive not struggle, but fascinating thing to see how that juvie just went for that guinea fowl, and it obviously died very quickly after the juvie got intact. But it was very interesting behavior and not very well documented with black eagles. So that was definitely the second one that I can think of. And then in 2013, I saw them bathing for the first time. And then these majestic eagles just become these scruffy, fluffy little chickens. And that was really special to see as well.
Awesome, man. That sounds really cool. I hope we get to see some of those things next year as well. That really sounds amazing. We have to talk about it always. We've chatted in many shows about various conservation efforts and threats to all the species we talk about. What are the threats that some of these birds are facing, and why is the Black Eagle Project so important?
Okay, so obviously in Johannesburg, the biggest threat is always the human threat. Now, that can be categorized in a few different things. And the biggest aspect of the human threat is habitat loss. So we are quite under a lot of pressure with new developments, trying to develop, especially on that reach, which the eagles basically use to hunt. So Black Eagle Project has been very active trying to battle development on that and trying to prevent it. And obviously, when the public is educated and they know that the eagles need this to be there, that will obviously help a lot. But that is really the biggest threat. And then you get significant threats, but not as big as that, which would be like power lines and removal of eggs, which is not really relevant in the botanical garden. It's not accessible and too well monitored. And then poisoning on farms when farmers maybe put poison out in carcasses to kill jackal or any problem animals for them. Then black eagles sometimes could scavenge. So those are a few threats that could possibly, be relevant with this pair.
Okay, fair enough. Well, let's hope that they can manage to avoid those threats in the future. But I know a lot of the viewers out there will be wondering, they often ask us as well, can they help out in any way, volunteer? And how can the Africam viewers help once the cameras are live?
Yeah, so I can, out of my mind, think of two ways to help. Obviously, the first one being funding and donations. We are a non-registered profit organization, so we will try and set up a channel for anyone to donate so that we can keep on protecting their habitat, etc., and educating the public on the eagles, etc. And then one of different helping ways that I definitely want to get this program up and running again. But back in the day, I mentioned we had good records of prey, and that was completely because of Africam monitors. I basically put on the Facebook page that we are looking to have good records of prey. So can you please, if you see prey being brought into the nest through the web camera, just make note, what time, does it look avian or mammal, depending on how good the Africam's quality is. And by doing that and having so many people watch the camera, we almost have, I'm pretty sure, a complete record for 2 years of the amount of prey and the frequency of prey being brought into the nest. And I definitely want to get that going, because that is a good indication of how much prey is available in their habitats, which is also very important to know.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I think people will be really excited to get involved. I'm even excited to get involved with that and send you all sorts of messages. Even if they bring a cockroach to the nest, I'll let you know, Ernest. It's important.
Yes, please.
Well, Ernest, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. I look forward to watching the cameras and these beautiful eagles, and good luck with everything at the Black Eagle Project. We'll be keeping an eye on you guys. And yeah, let us know if there's anything else we can do to help.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. This is amazing. I'm now all hyped up and excited myself. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, we are too. Don't worry. We are too. I can't wait to get the cameras up and running. But thanks again, Ernest. And thank you to all of you once again for watching the show. Please join us again next week for Africam4Good, brought to you by explore.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay informed for any of our upcoming show. But from all of us here in the Africam team, it's cheers for now.